I smiled as the oven dinged, signaling that the cupcakes were done. I pulled out the pan, put on my gloves, and set it on the counter. I had 2 hours to finish the order, and I was determined to make it perfect. "Celeste," came my neighbor's voice. I rolled my eyes, bracing myself for another day of her endless chatter. Mrs. Mace was a middle-aged woman, always dressed provocatively and wearing heavy makeup. She often dropped by unannounced to share her thoughts. "Good morning, Mrs. Mace," I replied, carefully decorating the cupcakes with blue frosting. "You work all the time, Celeste. Why don't you hire someone? You're young, you need a break," she said with a slight smile. Despite her eccentric appearance, there was always a hint of worry in her words. "I like to work on my own. That way, I can be sure of the result," I replied, still concentrating on the decoration. Mrs. Mace thought for a moment, then said, "I heard they're planning on building something big here. I hope they'll leave your bakery alone." My heart sank. "Who wants to buy this property?" "Some tycoon. Simon Bradley." That name alone was enough to make my peace evaporate. Bradley was known for buying land without regard for local businesses, but I wasn't about to let him ruin what I'd built with my own hands. I took off my apron and went to deliver the order. The drive home was usually quiet, but today I was thinking about my conversation with Mrs. Mace. When I returned to the bakery, I saw smoke. My heart sank. My bakery was in ruins. Everything I'd worked so hard for was gone. Everything. I stood there in the rubble, trying to process what had just happened. The man I had barely noticed spoke again. "Miss, you really need to leave. It's not safe here." I turned around and hissed, "How dare you?" His eyes widened. "Excuse me? How dare you destroy my store?" My voice grew louder. I screamed, not caring if anyone heard. "Miss, please calm down." He tried to sound calm, but it only made me angrier. "Calm down! You destroyed my business, my life. Who gave you the right to do this?" My eyes lit up. "If you give me a minute, I'll explain." The man was clearly nervous. "Number explain now, or I'll set this whole place on fire right here. And I swear I won't throw threats to the wind." My desire to force him to answer was becoming uncontrollable. "Hey, what's going on?" The new man's voice cut through the hum of my mind like a thunderclap. I turned around and saw him, tall, confident, with obvious irritation in his eyes. "What are you yelling like a madman in the middle of the street for?" He stepped between us, forcing me to take a step back. "You destroyed my store and you expect me to take it easy?" My hands began to shake with anger again. "We follow orders. If you have a problem, talk to the boss," he said with cold certainty. "Whose orders?" I lifted my chin. "I have all the paperwork. This is my property, and you had no right to destroy it." The man thrust a business card into my hand. "Contact the boss. We had nothing to do with this. We were ordered to tear down the shops, and we did our job. If you have any problems, talk to the person in charge." He turned and walked away as if nothing had happened. The people around him dispersed, and soon I was alone in the street among the ruins. I opened my hand and looked at the card. "Celeste! Celeste!" a voice called out, and I saw Mrs. Mace hurrying towards me. Her face was horrified, her eyes worried. "What happened? And what happened to your shop?" "It's all gone, Mrs. Mace. It's all destroyed." I could barely speak, looking at the remains of what had been my business. "Oh my God." She hugged me, trying to comfort me. And although I didn't realize it, I needed her support. "Who did this? Do you know?" She looked at me with concern. I don't know. He hid behind his orders. I have no idea who's behind this. My fingers tightened around the card again. Maybe it was Simon Bradley? She said thoughtfully, taking a tissue from her bag and handing it to me. He's strong enough to do something like that. I shook my head, gritting my teeth. I'm not crying, Mrs. Mace. I just don't know what to do now. Let's go have some tea and think about it, she said. Number, I'm not leaving until I figure out how to get revenge. I'll find out who did this and I'll go after them. Now. My heart was pounding. I looked at the business card the man had given me. There, on the thin paper, was a name written in elegant handwriting, and I knew immediately who was behind it. Simon Bradley. My rage was at its peak. This man had destroyed my dreams. Now, I was going to destroy his. Simon Bradley might seem like an impenetrable fortress, but that didn't mean I was turning back. The man who had ruined my life worked here, and I wasn't leaving until he gave me my business back. My bakery was all I had, and I wasn't going to back down, even if it meant walking past every guard. I squared my shoulders and walked in, fully aware that I was in the enemy's lair. Many would probably be afraid to come here, but not me. The office was impressive, with marble floors and shiny glass walls. But none of that changed the fact that Simon Bradley was preying on the little people. It wasn't fair, and I was here to make Simon Bradley understand that. Excuse me, where are you going? The young secretary asked me with a haughty look. Her outfit seemed to indicate that she was a person of a different circle. I need to see Simon Bradley, I replied, ignoring her displeasure. This conversation was a waste of time. I knew what I wanted and who I was seeing here. Mr. Bradley is busy and does not accept visitors without an invitation. You need to leave the building, she said, smiling slightly. I'm not leaving until I speak to him, I answered firmly, looking at the elevator. Leave me here? They didn't know who they were talking to. I pressed the button, and without waiting for the secretary's reaction, headed for the elevator. As soon as the doors opened, I walked inside and pressed the button for the floor where his office was. At that moment, I was ready to do anything, even break in by force. Once on the right floor, I confidently headed for the only door at the end of the corridor. Another secretary tried to stop me, but her objections did not matter to me. My goal was behind that door. I burst into the office, and my appearance immediately attracted attention. All eyes in the room turned to me, but I looked at only one person, Simon Bradley. His face was sharp, and his eyes burned with cold hatred. He was handsome, but there was something sinister in his appearance. Who gave you permission to come in here? He asked, in a low voice, rising from his chair. My name is Celeste Moreno, I said, not looking away for a moment. You destroyed my bakery, demolished it along with the land it stood on. It is illegal, and I want answers. Simon's eyes narrowed, as if he was trying to figure out who I was. You think you can come here and demand something? You took everything from me. I had no right to this land. Now I want compensation, I said firmly, gathering my strength internally. He chuckled. You'll get nothing but a waste of time. This land is mine, and what was there no longer matters. I took a step forward, cutting him off. You have no right to this. I'm not leaving until you give me what is rightfully mine. He walked towards me, his breath on my cheek. You won't get anything. People like you don't matter. Your business was just another obstacle in my way, and I've removed it. His words hurt me, but I knew I had to stay strong. I won't leave until I get justice. You may think you have everything, but I won't let you destroy me. Simon smiled coldly and turned away without another word. He thought he had won, but I knew I wouldn't stop until I got back what I had lost. Taking a deep breath, I stood up and took one last look at the massive doors. "I'll be back, Simon Bradley. You won't get rid of me that easily," I thought, as I stepped into the elevator. I left to do my own thing, but I'm back. I won't back down until I get what I want, even if he's rude to me. As soon as the elevator doors opened, 2 guards appeared in front of me. I wondered what he was doing, if the guards were so slow. Simon said I couldn't handle things. He was projecting his insecurities onto me. Well, I'd learned to understand his defense mechanisms, and would use them to my advantage one day. "Don't worry, I'm leaving," I told the guards as I walked out the door. At the last moment, I felt sorry for them for working for such a man, and decided to give them some advice. There are better companies out there that will pay you more, and treat you with respect. "Goodbye," I said as I left. For many, this would be the end. But not for me. For me, this is just the beginning. I swiped my finger across the screen and scrolled through Simon's profile, trying to learn everything I could about him. He might kick me out of his office, but he couldn't kick me out of his life until he gave me my bakery back. As soon as I got mine, I would be out of his life. But not before. "Hey Celeste, are you doing this again?" "Don't tell me you're still looking for Simon Bradley," Mrs. Mace asked as she walked into my apartment. Today, she was wearing a hot pink dress with blue trim and matching shoes. "I told you I wasn't backing down until he did what he had to do. If I had to blackmail him to get my bakery back, I will." "Celeste, be careful. Simon might hurt you," Mrs. Mace warned. "He's already hurt me by ruining my business. Now I have nothing to lose." "I'll fight him at his own game," I said, turning off my laptop. "Why don't you think about a new start? Start a new business," she suggested.
"I'll think about it, but first I want justice. Simon needs to answer for his actions." "Where are you going?" Mrs. Mace asked. "To Simon. He probably wasn't at the meeting, and he'll listen to me." "You're crazy. Simon will crush you if he gets mad. Be smart and don't take risks." "I'm going to get my bakery back, and it's his decision." "No matter the cost," I said, walking out of the apartment. I jumped on my scooter and sped toward his office. He didn't know what I'd do if he turned me down again. When I reached his company, I saw him walking towards his car. "Hey!" I shouted, running up. He looked at me with disdain. "How dare you show up again? Do you want to go to jail?" he asked coldly. "I don't like your face, but give me back the bakery." "I didn't steal anything. Your bakery was on my land, I just took it," he said, opening the car. "I have documents proving that this land is mine," I replied. "They're invalid. The land is mine now, so get out. And don't show up again," he said, getting into the car. But before he drove away, I grabbed his arm. "You can't do this," I said. "Get your hands off." Simon pushed me hard to the ground, and I fell. Pain shot through my arms and legs. He drove away, leaving me freezing in the street. I stood up, ignoring the pain. "Simon, you will regret this." Now I knew I had to go to his family. If he didn't talk, I would find someone who would. A few days later, feeling better, I decided to go to his house. I stood in front of the huge mansion, overcome with doubt. Would my enemy survive? Here? Lights glowed in the dark windows, and guards stood around, as if ready for my arrival. "Well, I'll find out," I whispered to myself, thinking about how to enter through the back door. Deep down, I knew Simon had probably warned the guards about me. He was sure I wouldn't stop. So I put on black clothes and blended into the evening shadows. Cautiously, watching every move of the guards, I hid behind the bushes. The front door was close, but I couldn't afford to be wrong. If I was spotted, I would be thrown out without hesitation. One guard stood right by the door, the other two were gone, and I waited impatiently for the last one to leave his post. As I hid, my irritation and resentment towards Simon came flooding back. How could he destroy everything I had spent years building in one fell swoop? He had destroyed my bakery and my life, and now I had to sneak in unnoticed. The two guards left, leaving the third. As I watched him, I suddenly realized that if I put on a cap and pretended to be a guard, I would have a chance of getting through unnoticed. Pulling my cap down lower, I stepped out of the shadows, mimicking their gait. "How long have you been standing here?" I asked, my voice hoarse, as if I had endured too many sleepless nights. "I'll take a break until Ty gets back," the guard replied, unaware of the ruse. "I'll cover for you," I offered. "Thanks, buddy," he replied, trusting me and leaving. Amazed at how easily I had fooled him, I hurried inside. The door finally opened for me, and I found myself in the Bradley mansion. When I entered the house, I found myself in a spacious hall with marble floors and luxurious chandeliers. My heart was pounding, but I tried to remain calm. I had come here not only for justice, but also for answers. Something about Simon seemed strange to me, his coldness, his abrupt decisions. Perhaps there was more to it than just hatred for me. But was there? I walked slowly, avoiding the servants' eyes. The house was quiet. Only distant footsteps could be heard. I knew Simon was somewhere here. I needed to find him, but I did not know what to expect. Suddenly, I heard a sound that made me freeze. A man's voice came from behind the massive doors. I moved closer and pressed myself against the wall, listening. Simon was talking to someone. He seemed worried. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "No, I can't let her show up again. She's in the way. This is all out of control." I tensed. Was he talking about me? My heart sank painfully, but I needed to know the truth. Listening carefully, I realized that the conversation had stopped. The door began to open, and I quickly hid behind a pillar. Simon came out alone. His face was pale, with a worried expression. At this moment, he didn't seem like the tough guy I had seen before. I took a step forward, fear and determination warring inside me. "Simon!" My voice was firm, but slightly trembling. He turned around abruptly, his eyes flashing in the dim light. "You," he said slowly, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "How did you get here?" "It doesn't matter. You have to answer me. Why did you ruin my life? Why do you keep torturing me?" I blurted out, my anger uncontrollably. Simon looked at me, his gaze stern, but there was something else in it. Regret? No, that couldn't be it. "You don't understand," he said quietly, taking a step forward. "I never wanted this. It was necessary." "Necessary?" I snorted, tears welling up in my eyes. "You ruined my business, my dreams, everything I loved. For what?" Simon took another step, bringing his face closer to mine, his voice even quieter. "Because if I hadn't, I would have lost more than you could ever imagine. You don't know the whole truth." I froze, confused by his words. What did he mean? All this time I thought he was just a selfish, rich guy who didn't care about others. But now there was something deep in his eyes that I couldn't decipher. "What truth?" I whispered. Simon took my hand gently, his touch unexpectedly warm. I felt my heart beat faster. Something in his demeanor had changed. It was as if the stern, cold Simon I knew had disappeared, leaving someone else behind. "I can't explain everything to you now," he said, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "But believe me, I didn't mean to hurt you. I did it to protect both of us." "Protect?" I asked, surprised. "From what? From who?" He leaned closer, his breath touching my skin. Our faces were so close I could hear his breathing. "I can't let myself get attached to you." His voice wavered. "It's too dangerous." I looked at him, stunned. Everything in my mind screamed that he couldn't be trusted, that he was manipulative. But my heart, cursed with this conflicting feeling, slowly began to melt. I wanted to push him away, to tell him that I hated him, but I couldn't. Instead, I took a step forward, almost into his arms. "Then tell me, Simon," I whispered. "What exactly is so dangerous? Why are you trying to keep me when you keep coming to me?" There was a pain in his eyes that I couldn't understand. Suddenly, he let go of my hand and turned away, as if struggling with something inside himself. "You don't understand. I can't let you stay here. You'll be in danger." I stepped forward and took his shoulder, turning him to face me. "I can decide for myself. You can't get rid of me that easily." Simon looked at me, his eyes shining with a mixture of pain and regret. He didn't move, but his inner conflict was visible even without words. I felt the tension in the room, as if our entire fate hung in the balance. "You really don't understand," he repeated quietly. "If I could, I'd leave you alone. But something stronger than me is pulling me toward you. It's destroying me, and it could destroy you." He stepped back, but I didn't let go. My hand held his wrist tightly. I felt a shudder run through him. His pretense of coldness was crumbling before my eyes. "I'm not afraid, Simon," I said, surprised at my own calm. "You can talk about how dangerous it is, how I shouldn't be around you. But the truth is, you've already dragged me into this. I've waited too long for the truth, and I'm not going to back down now." His breathing became heavier, and for a second, I saw in his eyes the passion he'd been trying to hide all this time. His jaw clenched, as if he was struggling with an internal decision he couldn't make. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Why can't you just leave?" I looked into his eyes and felt everything that had been building up inside me, the anger, the pain, the fear, give way to a single emotion. I could no longer deny that my hatred for him had long been mixed with something much deeper. "Because no matter what, I can't leave," I replied. "I feel like there's more to this than just anger and revenge. You're not who you seem." He suddenly exhaled, as if giving in to something inevitable. His arms wrapped around my shoulders, and he pulled me into him. I felt the warmth of his body, and in that moment, everything else around us ceased to matter. We were no longer enemies, no longer people whose lives had been ruined by decisions no one understood. We were just two people who, against all odds, found ourselves together. His lips touched mine, and the world disappeared. I forgot about the hate, about the bakery, about what he had done to me. There was only this moment in which our feelings mixed together, passion, pain, and perhaps something like love. When we pulled away, his gaze softened, but it still reflected the internal struggle he was going through. "I can't promise you that everything will be easy," he said, his voice almost shaking. "But if you're willing to risk it, I'll try to explain everything I've been keeping from you. But I warn you, the truth can hurt." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of confidence and fear growing in my chest. "I'm willing, but only if you're honest with me." Simon smiled slightly, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Hope. "Then let's go. We have a lot to talk about." He took my hand and we walked deeper into the house, towards the unknown truth that could change everything. But now I was ready to know it, even if it cost me everything.